Welcome back to Primary Source China Investment. We often talk about policy on this channel, but this week we're talking about the consumer because, well, the third plenum finished and there were really no obvious changes in the policy announced. So what's obvious to anyone paying attention is that the relationship between whomever occupies the White House in January and the party leader for life in China will remain chilly. And these two governments are going to continue to use all the tools available like WTO, passing new laws, and geopolitics to shape trade. But also, consumers have a vote now. And we're going to talk about the consumer. And we're going to start off with EVs. Pungo and I are not EV experts, but we can read the data. The headlines were bombastic when Biden announced a 100% tariff on all Chinese autos destined for the US. While currently there are no Chinese brands selling autos in the US, Buick, Lincoln, Polestar, and Volvo all sell cars in the US that are made in China. And all of these, except Polestar, are exempt from these tariffs as they have facilities in the US. But for all the hand-wringing that Mexico is going to be the back door for Chinese autos, it looks like the take-up for EVs in America might have already peaked, despite all of the incentives from the US government and the so-called threat of cheap China autos. It's beginning to look like Americans are not all in with EVs. And in fact, EV and plug-in growth is slower than ICE, internal combustion engines, in terms of sales. Furthermore, 50% of American EV owners are contemplating switching back to ICE vehicles. Tesla, the #1 brand in EVs, is losing sales in California, the biggest EV market. Tesla sales are down 17% year to date, and California makes up a third of US EV sales. All of this is to say, if you build it, subsidize it, or otherwise promote it, they don't always come. So those plans don't always pan out. Pungo, there's any thoughts about EV sales in the US? I mean, what's your experience? Do you even drive an EV?
I don't have too much experience in the EV, but a lot of friends purchased the EV. I think from the consumer perspective, definitely the cost is much lower. So
That's on the purchase price or the running costs?
it's definitely running cost.
Yeah.
Yeah, purchase price is really depends. Why they change the battery or all the related stuff. That's the get a different story. The key things is if that is a good car and save the money and also is design is looks like a fancy. Definitely, I will consider it.
Yeah.
I think EV car become much more competitive, and also this is a hybrid car as is gonna pop up. In this case, I think from a consumer perspective, they really don't care the brand if they're not competitive. For the same competitive, people can choose the domestic made car.
Yeah, this is so let's look at the mainland. So we'll flip that conversation we just had about Tesla in the US and talk about Tesla in China. Chinese consumers are starting to look at Tesla and, it looks like the odd auto out. Tesla in China in the first half of the year sold 278,000 vehicles. That's down 5.37% year on year. Sure, we've covered it before, right? The consumer is slowing on the mainland, but it hasn't slowed BYD. In the first half of 2024, BYD's NEV sales amounted to 1.6 million units, an increase of 28.5%. Or NIO, which delivered a record 57,000 autos, exceeding the upper band for the second quarter. Or Xpeng, which sales were up 27% for the second quarter, and on and on and on. It's not just Tesla, it's also the local brands in China are out competing or have a better value proposition than Tesla. A number of people have said Tesla hasn't updated designs in a number of years. So that's part of the competitive nature of the business.
I think Tesla is not because they're not good. Is the only reason is BYD get a better cost and a better design. So BYD get a much more improvement in the car.
Yeah, it's the overall value proposition. It's also, I just mentioned Neo and Xpeng. Their sales are up also. I mean, Tesla is really the only one that's down, actually. So it's not all about EVs. What about retail? Temu went from 0 to 50 million active users in the US. So we're talking about the US here. That compares with about 67 million monthly users on Amazon. You can bet that US retailers are putting Temu and Shein in their sites. Amazon is not going to just sit on their hands. Target is not just going to sit on their hands. They're going to actively go after all of the business models that are competing with them. And companies shouldn't depend on government protection, although there will be certainly plenty of proposals in the US and China. There's a number of things popping up right now. There's lawsuits against the importing of value less than $800, and that'll go through the court system. And then on the mainland, running a business on the mainland gets more and more complicated with regulations and regulations. So the point we're trying to make here is commerce is deceptively simple at its core. Create products and services that people want. The consumer has agency. If you are not making products for the consumer, whether that's in China or the US, you are going to suffer. You cannot look at government to save your business. And I think that's the dangerous point that we're at with some of these larger manufacturers.
That's exactly right. Temu is really competitive for the low price. Nobody can resist it for the low price. So they get this strategy successful in the China market and also in the global market. They use the same strategy to do it. Obviously, that's a lot of the argument on their strategy and many complaints or a related problem with that. But overall, it still works. So why you have options like the $4 to buy something, and then were you going to spend the $40 to buy it? So people just evaluate and think about it.
Yeah, there's a number of people, even before, Temu and Shein, a lot of people used to complain about Amazon. Oh, Amazon's too big. Well, stop ordering from Amazon. I mean, if you don't like that business model, then you have agency. Vote with your wallet. I mean, it's an old expression, but people are definitely voting with their wallet. I see this in the EV space. I mean, I just saw Ford is going to change a plant that was going to go EVs in Canada, and they're saying, you know what? I don't know if the demand is there. Maybe we just go back to ICE.
Sooner or later, this kind of the model will get all the industry involved and reshape them. So most of people didn't realize, just think about oh, I just buy the cheaper price from
Yeah.
the Temu. Probably that's also impacted your own company and your own business model.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of this show is the consumer does vote at the end of the day. So even if the governments want to push things in a certain direction, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. The old expression I mentioned earlier, build it and they will come. That's not necessarily the case. So we're going to leave it there for show W6. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.